Today's episode is sponsored by Petra Kolb. Hello and welcome once again to Film Pro Productivity and Success, the podcast that helps film professionals and other creative people to live a more focused, effective and happy life. My name is Carter Ferguson and this is episode 58, Information Overload and Dealing with Overwhelm. It's just been a few days since I released the last episode of the show, and this is the second of several new episodes in a series that I am releasing to respond to the ever-changing COVID-19 situation. I've been working on what they call evergreen content for Season 4. That is content that is more general and can be applied to our day-to-day life and work. But I've temporarily shelved 6 of those sort of standard episodes in favour of creating 6 new shows which are responding to matters more immediate. And if you're listening to this episode in the future and this crisis has passed, don't worry, the episode is also packed with useful information to help you to deal with information overload in your day-to-day lives. Now, in the last episode, I dealt with anxiety and how it can take control and shut you down if you're not careful. You don't want to get out of the other end of this crisis and realise that all you did the whole time was panic about an unknown future. Do you want to take back control and take advantage of this opportunity to get things done? If that's you, then go back and check out that last episode. Now today I'm looking at something which I have been struggling with for far, far longer than this recent crisis, but it's one which is being highlighted right now in our current situation, and it's one I felt I had to respond to. Daniel Levitin, the American neuroscientist, said, "We really are living in an age of information overload. Google estimates that there are 300 exabytes, that's 300 followed by 18 zeros of human-made information in the world today. Only 4 years ago, they were just 30 exabytes. We've created more information in the past few years than in all of human history before us," unquote. And I'm sure we've all been struggling recently to understand exactly what the hell is going on with COVID-19, but it's not through lack of information about it, is it? In fact, information is pouring into us at an outrageous rate, and the more and more that we take in, the more and more nonsensical it can all sound. In fact, I nearly called this episode Information Pollution because of that very problem. It starts to feel to me like I'm getting polluted with a whole load of garbage along the way, and I just can't quite find the real information, the facts in amongst it all. Anyway, this isn't a situation that's unique to our current predicament, as I said before, and every day, regular day that is, I struggle with this problem. I get emails that can be pertinent and need my attention. I get a whole bunch of emails that aren't pertinent and aren't relevant as well, incidentally. I get phone calls and other messages relating to work and day-to-day life that just can't be ignored too. I chat with friends and colleagues and I get scripts sent to me with fight scenes that I have to read, and then I get updates and rewrites to those scripts that I have to stay on top of as well. And I watch YouTube videos. I've talked about it a few times. I've got a bit of a YouTube addiction, and I'll be talking about that a little bit later in the series, but it's one of those things. But I watch YouTube videos and get into them, and I listen to podcasts, and I hear about amazing productivity solutions along the way through these things that grab my attention. And as I go on to promote the show on social media, I also get responses and private messages that I have to consider. And I also get invited to things like app trials and group discussions, and as I continue to reply to messages wherever they come from in an effort to close down that avenue of communication, inevitably I still get responses which require even more of my time and effort, and to be honest, it's all really far too much. Yesterday I got introduced to someone on Twitter who had a productivity app for social media. And somebody thought, oh, that would be really interesting for Carter, and they tried to connect the two of us together. And I thought, great, that sounds interesting. However, I still had to politely refuse to look at it, to even look at it, as I absolutely don't have the time to look at more productivity apps when I already have more productivity solutions than I know what to do with. And the other thing about that app was that it was specific to social media, and social media at the moment is not a priority for me. A priority for me is getting these shows out, and I had to put it aside. Instead, what I have to do with things like that come my way is I put it in Pocket, which is like a bookmarks app. It's like a pocketbook extension you would put on Google Chrome. I've talked about it before, or you can put it on your phone, and then you can look up these things later. And I kind of give myself a mental note to have a look at them at a more appropriate time as well. But I had to say no simply because I have got actual work to do, and that work simply can't be streamlined. Creating content like what I'm saying to you now, these words, it's come from research and a lot of effort. If I miss that bit out, there is no show to promote, so social media has to go second to that. These episodes just don't write themselves, and no amount of productivity apps can write them for me. Whilst I'm communicating in a polite manner, which I always try to do, while I'm replying to people and interacting and closing the doors to problems and situations, I am never actually doing any of my own work, and that is where information overload becomes a problem for me. Now, although much of what I described earlier there is important, this information that comes into me on a day-to-day basis, although much of it's important and deserves some attention, I have to recognise that I'm still only one man with only so much time in a day, and I have to stay on top of what is important. And incidentally, if you've not heard my episode on protecting your mental energy, that's episode 18, you really need to go back and give it a listen. That episode talks about the fact that it's not really time we don't have when we turn something down. We say to somebody, I can't help you, I don't have any time. The real reason we turn it down is because perhaps we feel stressed about something else that's pressuring us, or that we're tired and we don't have the mental energy or the brain power to deal with it. Consider that point next time you catch yourself saying, I don't have time to someone, when the reality is you probably don't have the mental energy to deal with what they're asking you to get involved in. One of my favourite tweeters is Isaiah Hankel, who wrote the book, it's a great book, The Science of Intelligent Achievement, and he says that mental energy is the world's hottest commodity. People are going to try to steal it, drain it, and suck it up every second that you're awake, yet very few of us protect it. Few of us know how. And please do get that book or go back to episode 18 to find out more about this concept. I also talk about it I've got an episode on time wasters, and I think I've got an episode on toxic people as well. Time wasters and toxic people will suck away your mental energy, and you want to cut them out of your lives if you're going to get moving on stuff. So my situation was in near overload before COVID-19 started knocking on my door with a massive, I want to say shitstorm, but I probably can't, a massive amount of mixed information. Information which only now the experts actually seem to be agreeing on, but information, nonetheless, which is twisted and misrepresented by what I regard as a very dangerous media who have been feeding on our fears and worries here in the UK and elsewhere on the planet like vultures. This has been further confused by the swarm of ill-informed public figures and self-nominated know-it-alls on social media specifically who have been spewing their unqualified opinions all over the place. I watched a video the other day that was supposed to be from the Singapore government. That's the way it was presented. But as I went into it and I started watching it, I was thinking, hang on a minute, this just doesn't add up. There's something not right about this information. It was actually, it turned out, from some media company that had compiled a lot of random facts and information about the virus and kind of smudged them all together into a slick video, which, if it really was from the Singapore government, would have had a government logo on it somewhere, and it didn't. That basically was a load of garbage that I watched. But I had to get through the whole thing, which was about 5 minutes, before I was like, I've just wasted 5 minutes of my time. And there's, at this point, if you're listening to this in the future, there's just masses and masses of misinformation about coronavirus and its effects. The very concept of objective truth is fading out of the world. Lies will pass into history. George Orwell, unquote. So that's enough of a rant about the white noise of information overload, but how do we overcome this? Well, it's not rocket science, but it will take a bit of effort on your part. The answer is filters. We must process and reduce the vast array of chaotic and polluted information that comes our way by filtering, streamlining, shutting out and deleting the irrelevant, inaccurate and unhelpful sources of information which we interact with. By doing this, we can more directly and accurately get to the stuff that really matters. I covered this in detail in my mini-season within the season of Season 3. It was about the Law of Success in 16 Lessons. Napoleon Hill talks about how if we are to be successful in our life and work, we must separate facts from mere information. This is what he calls accurate thought. And here are a few of Hill's thoughts on accurate thinking from that book. He warns us to accept that loose, unsound opinions can be mistaken for accurate thinking, but that most opinions are without value because they are based on bias, prejudice, intolerance, guesswork, hearsay evidence, and out ignorance. He also talks about not believing what one reads in the papers, and I often use the phrase myself, don't believe everything you read on the internet, to highlight the same point. The accurate thinker, Hill says, will not accept as such all that he sees and hears for the reason that it constitutes the rocks and reefs on which so many people flounder and go down to defeat in a bottomless ocean of false conclusions. And that's a little bit archaic, that sentence, but he's saying that if we base our conclusions on a false premise derived from a false piece of information, then we are going to fail. Hill, who trained as a lawyer, talks of a principle called the law of evidence. The object of this law is to get to the facts. Any judge can proceed with justice to all concerned if they have the facts upon which to base their judgment, but they may play havoc with innocent people if they circumvent the law of evidence and reach a conclusion or judgment based upon hearsay information, unquote. If you want to know more about all of this, then please go back and have a listen to that mini-series on the Law of Success. It's episodes 40 through 45 of this show. It took me an absolute age to put together, but it's a very, very valuable series. Information overload is a plague. There's no vaccine. There's no cure. The only thing you have is self-control. Carol Kroll, unquote. One thing I'd like to add here is that when you try to consume more and more information each day, you start to notice that even though you've been reading tons of articles, watching tons of videos, and listening to tons of podcasts, you can take in too much information without having a moment to pause and really consider it. And that's a problem, and really it makes much of what you're doing a waste of time. When I was coaching fencing, we were taught that new information needs a period of reflection to be processed by the human brain, and in fencing terms that's also a physical thing by the body as well. It needs a period of reflection and a period of time to settle into the ideas before we can take in more information and learn new things. But by unremittingly jamming our brains full of new, even high quality information, but not giving ourselves time to reflect upon it, we are in effect wasting our time. We need to slow down to catch up, if you get my meaning. And I'll just say here, something that's been on my mind as well, that you've got to be careful you don't get any sort of information addiction along the way. You sooner or later convince yourself that you need to be on the constant lookout for even more new information and can never quite settle if you're not careful. This is sometimes referred to as FOMO, which I'll go into in a later episode on technology addiction. That's coming up later in this season. But FOMO is an anagram for fear of missing out, and that is definitely a problem of addiction. The belief that you need to be on this constant lookout for information is just not true. You don't need every piece of advice possible to live your life, to do your work, or to enjoy your passion. You must find the self-control to stop yourself constantly seeking that new information. You got to fight this temptation and be as ruthless as possible about it. Now, if you think that you recognise any or all of these things in yourself, then you need to take control of the quality of information that you're receiving. And here are a few suggestions of how you can do this. And I rattle on about this first suggestion all the time, but it's a staple of a productive life, and it just can't be ignored, and it is know your goals. If you don't know where you're going, you're never going to get there. And in turn, if you don't know what you want, you can't be selective in the information you seek. I've done countless episodes on this topic, but it's essential for productivity that you know where you're heading. Otherwise, you'll just wander aimlessly through life, Change your unspecific hopes and dreams into actionable, precise goals, and note, by the way, that you are, what's the figure, 42% more likely to achieve them if you write them down. Don't do what many do as well when you go to write them down and half write them down. Make your goals S, specific, M, measurable, A, attainable, R, realistic, and T, time sensitive. Give them a deadline. If you're being unspecific or woolly in your goals, you will fail to reach them. It's as simple as that. Social and economic effects teacher Clay Shirky says there's no such thing as information overload. He says it's filter failure. My next suggestion is that you work out where your data is coming from and you curate it. Do a written assessment of it if you need to. I listed earlier where mine comes from. Yours might be different. If you know where it's coming from, you can do something about it and put some controls in place. Following this, we're getting to the filter part. Filter the information that's coming in. For example, I decided to only accept data regarding the coronavirus from verified official channels. In my case, that was the NHS, the National Health Service here in the UK, or from people online who had actually contracted and gone through the process of recovery from the virus. I ignore all the others. And if I catch myself looking at them, I switch off. Fear of missing out is something I also suffer from, and it makes me sometimes wander a little bit. I'm not perfect, but I use my higher level thinking head and I put a stop to it as soon as I kind of realise I've gone down that road. Filtering the information massively limits the amount of data that you're receiving in the first place. And knowing your goals will help you to do this when it comes to other matters too. As you become more selective in what you allow through your filters, and you choose what you are going to follow and read based on your clearly set out goals, you can begin to ignore the rest. I recently decided to stop listening to certain filmmaking podcasts, for example, because at this time I'm not making any films. Instead, I've been listening to a couple of marketing shows which are more in alignment with my current goals, which largely revolve around how I can build an audience for this show. Believe me, folks, it's difficult, although I'm not doing too badly. Also, rather than blindly following every single YouTube account out there, I only dip into a selective few. Of course, the trouble with YouTube is that it's always offering me cat and storage locker videos, which pull me in. I don't know why I watch storage locker videos. I don't enjoy them. I don't particularly like the people that I see on them. I just get that fear of missing out thing, and suddenly I've watched another 15 minutes of somebody opening up a box and luring me in with a thumbnail that suggests they find something exciting, and inevitably they don't really. Anyway, I'll deal with tech addiction, as I said, in a later show. But in short, if you've got a problem, similar problem to me, then you probably want to add a website blocking feature to your browser. And this is available on Chrome is what I use, but it's available through phone apps as well. I use BlockSite. It's an extension called BlockSite for Chrome. BlockSite, I think is the spelling. And that stops me going on to YouTube if I activate it. And it's not always activated because I also use YouTube for research of this show, and that starts to become a problem when you go to research technology addiction, for example, and then you find yourself watching a cat video. Have any of you been there? Well, if you've got a problem with that, get BlockSite or a similar app and add it to your browser. Another example of filtering is in your email. Most email boxes can be set up these days to automatically filter out promotions and social media from everyday emails. Your spam filter already probably cuts out a whole load of crap that you don't even know about. Now, the next thing that you can do, and I also talked about this in the last episode, is to catch yourself if you are forever wallowing in the news and trying to catch up with it. This will only lead to anxiety and stress. Please listen to my episode on outrage porn, which is about how we are manipulated by the media to find out more about this. That's episode 49. I've noted recently how we get a daily death toll, and inevitably the article says death toll rises, widespread panic, or words to that effect. I always think when I see it, well, of course it rises. It's hardly going to go down, is it? They're just adding the figures to the previous day. These headlines are designed to pull you in, and when they pull you in, you'll find yourself wasting a lot of time, reading a lot of information, which, let's face it, is probably based in some truth, but cannot be relied on at all. It's also designed to get you emotionally involved. Stay away from reading the news if you've got a problem with information overload. It isn't going to help you. My next suggestion is that you delete or remove the apps that you don't need from your phone, or the groups that you don't need to be part of on Facebook, or the social media accounts on which you waste the most time. I've been invited onto a few Facebook groups recently and a trial for a few apps, which I have done, but I honestly don't have the time to deal with them. This new information giving me notifications on my phone. I don't have time to deal with it or to properly interact with the people on them. I think that politeness has kept me using them for a while, but I am now at the stage where I really must start deleting them and not worry about hurting people's feelings. You should also ensure that you are unsubscribed from receiving notifications from social media. That's a must do. And if you've not done it recently, go through your emails and unsubscribe from as many of them as you can. Just get past that fear of missing out that we've talked about and go for it. If you know your goals and are really committed to them, you will know which ones matter and which don't. Now, those that follow me on social media will know that I regularly come off of social networking for a month at a time. I've done it 3 times in the last 2 years, and that can really boost your productivity. You need a bit of courage to do it, but once you're in there, I've got to say, it's brilliant. It can boost your productivity and cut back on that information overload that you're feeling. I kept the accounts live while I was offline, by the way. I deleted the apps from my phone and I blocked them on my PC so that I wasn't tempted to go into it. And I've got to be honest, I wasn't tempted. I didn't go into it. I think there was one occasion I had to go in because I was researching an episode and I had to unlock the site so that I could read one message. But I didn't look at any of the notifications. I didn't read anything else. I went in, got the information I required, and got back out again. I really can't understate how incredible it is not to have the yoke of social media about your neck for just a few weeks. Here's the other thing too. It makes virtually no difference to your follower numbers. There's pretty much the same numbers when you come back as you had when you started. So consider a social media break for 30 days if you've got severe information overload. Honestly, you will not regret it. Another thing that you can do to stop the flow of information pollution heading in your direction is to start saying no. It's my go-to productivity answer to get more done and simplify my life. I simply can't get on top of my own stuff if I'm constantly getting pulled into other people's. So make no your default answer unless you are in complete alignment with your goals, which you've already set out, or that you just genuinely want to do it to help someone out. But be careful with that helpful thing. The Mr. Nice Guy or Mr. Nice Gal thing can mean that you start saying yes to things that you will absolutely regret later. And there's really nothing worse for both of you if you commit to something and then let that person down at a later date because you really never had any time in the first place, or mental energy perhaps. So honestly try. I've said this in a number of shows. It was episode 2 was the first time I said it. Try to make no your default answer. It will make your life easier. Now, the final suggestion I have on my list is simple. You're not going to like it, but turn it off. If you're constantly being distracted by your phone and addicted to the information overload that's coming through it, for example, then turn it off. And I know that this concept is possibly freaking you out, but you know that you can do it if you really try. It's not that difficult. You do have a second option, perhaps, and it's a lesser option, but I'd say go for the turn it off first before you go here. But your lesser option is to put it onto Do Not Disturb. That at least will stop the information flow coming to you for a time until you go back into it again. It's going to stop the phone going off while you work on tasks that require your attention, and perhaps even doing something like leaving the phone in another room and on silent might be one worth considering too. This will stop you forever reaching for it and checking whatever social media thing you have the fear of missing out on at the same time. Steve Jobs said this, and it's very relevant to what we're talking about here. He said, "That's been one of my mantras, focus and simplicity." Simple can be harder than complex. You have to work hard to get your thinking clean to make things simple. But it's worth it in the end, because once you get there, you can move mountains, unquote. Now, once you've used these filters that I've been talking about and got past all the garbage information and down to the stuff that really matters, you've got two options. Those options are deal with it now or deal with it later. Have you ever faced a situation where you've put off so many small tasks that by the time that you come to deal with them and you can no longer put them off, you're facing an absolute mountain of them, and it gives you that kind of feeling of dread inside? You might even find that you've put it off further and further, and it's got bigger and bigger as you ignore it. Dealing with things as they come in is the solution to the build-up of problems that you'll have to face later. So I recommend that you use the 2-minute rule to combat this situation. That is, if a task takes 2 minutes or less to do, just do it now. I'll say that again. If a task takes 2 minutes or less to do, just do it now. And if you can't deal with things immediately, there's another rule that I use, and it's called the one-touch rule. It's a little bit more involved. The one-touch rule says that you must complete the task in a single sitting without distraction. And that forces you to put stuff off, but also to properly deal with them at a designated time. So if I had a task that came in and it was going to take 20 minutes, I wouldn't even touch that task until I knew I had 20 minutes in my schedule in which to deal with it, and then I would complete it in one sitting. If I had a task that was 2 hours long, I would do the same thing. I would put it off to a point where I had 2 hours spare, or a little bit more ideally, and then I would deal with it then. That's the one-touch rule, that once you start something, you don't stop until it's finished. It's a really great way of getting slightly more complex tasks done and behind you. And another option you have, incidentally, is to pass it on to someone else to deal with. I'm going to be doing an episode on delegating. It's not the easiest thing to do in the world. I'm having a little bit of trouble, I've got to be honest, but there is the possibility that if there's something that you've got to deal with, you could hand it over to someone else to deal with for you. And you can hear all about these rules and a couple more in episode 9, 4 great hacks to beat procrastination. So go and check that one out. So let me sum up by saying that if you've been having problems with information overload, then I suggest that you take some of the steps that I've talked about here to control the way you're receiving and processing and filtering information. Use this as a call to action, if you like. It'll pull you out of the doldrums of inactivity if you're in there and give you the freedom to get things done again. Use these steps to filter through this era of information pollution and accept the invitation to join your own life again. I hope that you found today's show helpful in the current situation or in life in general. And I just want to say once again before I wrap up that if this show is helping you in some way, then please pass it on to someone else. Getting new subscribers is very tough, as there's over 700,000 podcasts in the world today, and that number is growing. If you can promote this show in any way at all, then I would be eternally grateful. I've not had anyone do this yet, but if you enjoy the show and it's helping you in some way, then please take a screen grab as you listen to the show on your podcasting app and put that screen grab up on social media with a link to where folk can listen. I've got great efforts of people retweeting my posts that I put out myself. Please remember that a retweet is far more valuable than a like, because a retweet spreads the word. A like just says thumbs up, well done. And whereas I like the thumbs up, I would also at the same time like to get a few more listeners. And if you do that, I will give you a shout out on a future show. There you go. Ooh, interactive. And in the next episode of this show, episode 59, which will be released in just a few days, I am going to be speaking with keynote speaker and mindset coach Dee Blakely. And I interviewed him for a show that was going to go out a little bit later in the season. However, it's on the topic of mindset, and I think that it could be quite relevant for those of us that are maybe not in the right headspace during this coronavirus crisis. So I've pulled that forward, and that's going to be released on Friday night, so look out for that one. Now, let me end today with some more words from Napoleon Hill. And it's about accurate thought. Again, it's just so important, this stuff. Please go and check out that. If there's another call to action for you, if you really want one, go back and listen to the Law of Success in 16 Lessons, episode 40 through 45. It's filled with brilliant stuff about success. Anyway, Napoleon Hill said, accurate thought involves two fundamentals. First, you must separate facts from mere information. And second, you must separate facts into two classes, the important and the unimportant. Only by doing so can you think clearly and accurately. Now take control of your own destiny. Keep on shooting, and join me next time on Film Pro Productivity and Success. The music that you're listening to right now is Adventures by Ehumitsu. You can view the show notes for this episode on the official website, filmproproductivity.com. You can follow my personal account on Twitter and Instagram at fight_director, or follow the show on Twitter at filmproprodpod, or on Facebook at filmproproductivity. This episode was written in collaboration with screenwriter, producer and radio talk show host Christina Littleson, and she is at Littleson114 on Twitter. If you've been listening to the show and you enjoy it, please subscribe, spread the word, and leave an awesome review.